Hey everyone. I never thought I'd be posting here, but after everything that's happened, I need to get this off my chest. For context, I'm Mason, 25, and up until recently, I thought my family was just a little dysfunctional. Turns out, there's something else entirely. I've always been the responsible one, which in my family is just code for the one we can dump all the problems on. My younger brother, Chase, 22, is the golden child. If he so much as breathes, my parents act like he just cured cancer. Meanwhile, I could win the lottery and they'd tell me to make sure I saved some for my brother. The favoritism has been glaring my whole life, but I've learned to deal with it. Or at least, I thought I had. I pay rent to live at home, $500 a month. That's right, $500 for a bedroom that still has the same Ninja Turtles wallpaper from when I was 10. Meanwhile, Chase? Rent-free, eating food I help pay for, leaving lights on like we live in a damn power plant, and driving a brand new Audi RS5 that my parents bought him as a congrats for finally graduating after 6 years of what I assume was intense Call of Duty training. I should have seen it coming when they gave him that car. I mean, I worked my ass off in college, full-time student, 2 part-time jobs, graduated with honors. And you know what I got? A $50 gift card to Chili's. No party, no car. No, we're so proud of you. Just, here's some microwaved mozzarella sticks. Now go back to work. But Chase? He barely scrapes by with a 2.3 GPA, and they hand him a $75,000 car with a bow on top, like he's a game show contestant. I can't even describe the level of smugness that radiated off him after that. Every conversation somehow circled back to his car. Dude, you have no idea how smooth this ride is. Bro, you should hear the speakers in this thing. Man, girls love this car. It became his entire personality overnight. And when he wasn't flexing about it, he was driving like he was auditioning for the next Fast and Furious. Speeding down residential streets, showing off launch control in parking lots, doing donuts at 2 a.m. like an absolute moron. I pointed out that maybe, just maybe, treating public roads like a racetrack wasn't the best idea. His response? Relax, dude. The car's got all these safety features. It practically drives itself. Yeah, that's definitely how that works. And of course, my parents defended him. He's young, let him enjoy himself. You're just being bitter because you didn't get a car. He's responsible. He won't do anything stupid. Oh yeah? Let's fast forward to 2 weeks ago. I was in my room, working late on a project, when I heard my dad's phone ring around 2 a.m. I knew something was up because instead of his usual half-asleep hello, he answered in full panic mode. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I caught snippets. Words like crash, hospital, and tow truck. I went downstairs just in time to see my mom pacing in the kitchen, pale as a ghost. When I asked what was wrong, she mumbled something about Chase having a little accident with the car. A little accident. At 3:30 a.m., my dad pulled into the driveway with Chase slumped in the passenger seat. One shoe missing, a cut on his forehead, and reeking of alcohol. My parents rushed him inside, whispering furiously. When I followed, my dad turned to me with that serious tone he uses when he's about to say something completely ridiculous but wants it to sound reasonable. Mason, listen. We need you to do us a favor. I raised an eyebrow. A favor? He glanced at Chase, who was barely conscious, then back at me. We need you to say you were the one driving. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because for a split second, I genuinely thought he was joking. He wasn't. I waited for the punchline, but it never came. My dad just stared at me, dead serious, as if asking me to take the fall for my brother's drunk driving crash was a completely reasonable request. Wait, I said, shaking my head. You want me to say I was driving? My mom stepped in, her voice soft like she was trying to reason with a child. Mason, sweetie, it's just that, if the police find out Chase was drinking, he could get into serious trouble. Yeah, I said flatly. Because he was drinking and crashed his car. Chase, half-conscious on the couch, slurred, Come on, bro. Just help me out, man. It's no big deal. No big deal. I looked at the pathetic scene in front of me. My brother, who had spent the past year treating me like dirt because I didn't have a cool car, was now begging me to save him from the consequences of his own stupidity. And my parents? They weren't just enabling it. They were orchestrating the cover-up. No, I said, crossing my arms. Not happening. My dad's face darkened. Mason, this is important. We're a family. We need to protect each other. I almost laughed. Protect each other? Since when? Oh, so now we're a family? Where was all this protect each other energy when I was paying rent while Chase lived here for free? Where was it when you bought him a luxury car and gave me a Chili's gift card? I gestured at Chase, who was now scrolling through his phone like none of this was even his problem. Why do I always have to clean up his mess? My mom sighed, rubbing her temples like I was the one being difficult. Mason, please, just this once. This once. I cut in. This once? You mean like when I had to give up my summer job money to cover his failed college classes? Or when you made me lie to Grandma about why Chase needed extra birthday money? Or when I had to take the blame for him getting caught with weed in high school? Silence. Yeah, I thought so. My dad's jaw tightened. Look, we'll make it worth your while. You take the blame, and we'll wipe your rent for the next 3 months. Oh, wow. 3 whole months of not paying to live in my own childhood home. What a steal. I shook my head. Not interested. Now my mom was getting desperate. Mason, if the police get involved, Chase could lose his license. He could have a record. He might not be able to get a good job in the future. I stared at her in disbelief. You're worried about his future? What about mine? You want me to have a DUI on my record? You want me to explain to my boss why I suddenly have a criminal charge? You'll be fine, my dad dismissed. You're responsible. Employers will understand it was just a mistake. That was it. That was the moment I realized they weren't asking me for help. They had already decided I was doing this. In their minds, my life was just something to sacrifice for Chase's benefit. I turned to Chase. You wrecked your car. You were drunk. Own up to it. He shrugged. Dude, it's just a car. Insurance will cover it. I laughed, but not in a funny way. You think insurance is going to cover a DUI crash? Chase blinked. Wait, they won't. I looked at my parents. Please tell me you raised someone smarter than this. That's when my dad finally snapped. He grabbed my arm, pulling me aside, his voice lowering to that you better listen tone he loved using. You're going to do this, he hissed. Because if you don't, I'll make sure you regret it. I yanked my arm free, disgusted. Oh yeah? What are you going to do, kick me out? Silence. My dad's eyes flickered for a second, because we both knew the truth. He had nothing over me anymore. I had savings. I had a good job. I had options. So I smiled. Yeah, that's what I thought. I turned on my heel and went straight to my room, locking the door behind me. My parents banged on it for a few minutes, demanding I be reasonable. Chase didn't say a word, probably too busy figuring out how he was going to get out of this mess without me. The next morning, I woke up to something unexpected. My brother's car, what was left of it, was gone. And when I went downstairs, my parents weren't just upset. They were panicked. The house was tense, the kind of tension that makes the air feel thick, like a storm is coming. My mom was pacing in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, whispering frantically. My dad sat at the table, staring at his coffee like it had personally betrayed him. Chase was nowhere to be seen. And most noticeably, the destroyed Audi was gone. I leaned against the doorway, crossing my arms. So, where's the car? My mom jolted, turning away from her call. My dad just sighed, rubbing his temples. It's being taken care of. Taken care of? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. And what does that mean? My mom, still clutching her phone like it was a lifeline, shot me a pleading look. Mason, honey, I know you're upset, but we need to come together as a family on this. Ah, there it was. The good old family loyalty card. I laughed, shaking my head. Right. Just like we came together as a family when Chase got a free car and I got a bill for rent? Or when I had to work my ass off while he got a 6-year vacation in college. Don't start, Mason, my dad said, his voice edged with warning. I'm not starting anything, I said. You already did when you tried to pin his drunk driving on me. My mom huffed, finally snapping. You're so dramatic. We just asked for a small favor. You asked me to commit a crime. Silence. For a moment, my mom just blinked at me, mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to find a way to spin this into something reasonable. My dad, on the other hand, had clearly decided to just double down on the delusion. We're handling it, he said firmly. That's all you need to know. Which meant they had done something shady. I knew my parents. When they were desperate, they got creative, and not in the thinking outside the box kind of way. More like the let's pretend reality works differently if we just lie hard enough kind of way. So I started piecing it together myself. Drunk driving meant no insurance payout. The car was totaled. They'd need a lot of money to fix or replace it. And now, suddenly, the car was gone. I glanced at my mom, who was nervously tapping her nails against the counter, avoiding my gaze. You told me last night that you were worried about Chase losing his license, I said slowly. And now, the car he crashed just disappears overnight? No answer. I turned to my dad. Tell me you didn't report it as stolen. Nothing. Just a twitch in his jaw. My stomach sank. Oh my God. You did. My mom flinched. We had no choice, Mason. The repairs would have been too expensive. And we knew you weren't going to help. So you committed insurance fraud. Holy sh*T. I ran a hand down my face, trying to process it. I mean, I knew they were willing to throw me under the bus for Chase. But this? Filing a false police report? Lying to the insurance company? They weren't just covering for him anymore. They were breaking the law. And the worst part? They actually thought they'd get away with it. This is insane, I muttered. Do you even realize how serious this is? If they find out, you could both go to jail. My dad scoffed. Nobody's going to jail, Mason. It's just a paperwork technicality. I stared at him. A paperwork technicality? That's what you're calling felony fraud. But they weren't listening. They had already convinced themselves this was the only solution, that they were just bending the rules instead of outright committing a crime. And Chase? He was nowhere to be found. I pulled out my phone and checked our family group chat. Nothing. No messages from him. I scrolled through social media, and sure enough, there he was, posting Instagram stories from some bar with his friends like nothing had happened. This guy. He totaled his car, got his parents to commit fraud for him, and was already back to partying. Meanwhile, I was standing in my parents' kitchen, realizing that I had two options. Pretend I didn't know anything and let them drag me down with them when this inevitably blew up. Make sure I wasn't anywhere near the blast radius when it did. And trust me, it was going to blow up. Because if there was one thing I knew about my parents, it was that they weren't as smart as they thought they were. I left the kitchen before I could say something that would make things worse. Not that it mattered. My parents had already made up their minds, and nothing I said would change the fact that they were about to get themselves into serious trouble. I shut myself in my room, pacing back and forth. I needed to think. They had filed a false police report. They had told the insurance company that Chase's car had been stolen. Except it wasn't. It was totaled. By him. After drinking. The second an investigator looked into it, they'd figure it out. Hell, I'd figured it out in under 5 minutes. And when it all came crashing down, my parents would absolutely try to blame me. Mason was acting out. Mason was always jealous of Chase. Mason must have done something. It was a playbook I had seen before. And this time, I wasn't sticking around to be the scapegoat. I grabbed my laptop and started looking up apartment listings. I'd been saving to move out for months, and while I had planned on waiting until I had a little more stacked up, I wasn't waiting anymore. By sheer luck, I found a place, small, but clean, in my price range, and available immediately. I called the landlord. If I can pay first and last month's rent today, how soon can I move in? She hesitated. I mean, if you can do the deposit too, I can have the lease ready by tomorrow. Done. I didn't even think twice. I was getting out of here. I packed that night. Everything that mattered. Clothes, important documents, my laptop. I wasn't going to tell my parents until I had the keys in my hands, but I wasn't giving them a chance to talk me out of it. The next morning, before I left for work, I sent Chase a text. Just so you know, I'm not covering for you. Whatever happens next is on you. He left me on read. Good. I went to work as usual, but something in my gut told me to keep an eye on my phone. And sure enough, the storm hit before I even finished my lunch. I was in the break room when my phone buzzed, a text from my mom. Mason, come home immediately. The police are here. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my keys and ran to my car. I barely remember the drive home, my mind racing the whole way. Had they figured it out already? Had the insurance company seen through the lie? When I pulled into the driveway, my worst fears were confirmed. 2 police cars. Lights flashing. And my parents on the porch, looking pale as ghosts. Chase was standing next to them, arms crossed, smirking. Smirking. That's when I knew. This wasn't about them. They were trying to pin it on me. I barely had time to kill the engine before my mom was rushing toward me, her eyes wide and desperate. Mason, she hissed under her breath. Just tell them you were driving. It'll be easier this way. I froze, my grip tightening on my keys. Easier? For who? Before I could respond, one of the officers approached me, her expression calm but unreadable. Mason Carter? I nodded. Yeah, that's me. We received a report that you may have been involved in an incident regarding a stolen vehicle. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs. A stolen vehicle? I repeated. Chase, the absolute snake, finally spoke up. Yeah, Mason, you know. The Audi? The one you took. I actually laughed. A sharp, incredulous sound that made the officer raise an eyebrow. You're joking, right? I turned to Chase. You crashed your own damn car, and now you're trying to say I stole it? Chase shrugged, his smirk never wavering. I mean, I wasn't driving it when it disappeared. My dad cleared his throat, stepping forward. Mason, listen. We don't want to make this harder than it has to be. Just be honest. Honest. They were really going all in on this. I turned back to the officer. Let me get this straight, I said. My parents reported the car as stolen. And now they're saying I stole it? The officer glanced at her partner, then back at me. We're just gathering statements right now. But there's some inconsistencies in the report that we need to clarify. I let out a slow breath. Okay. Time to stay calm. Look, I said, keeping my voice steady. I have no idea what they told you, but I wasn't anywhere near that car after the accident. I didn't steal it, and I sure as hell didn't wreck it. You know who did? Him. I jabbed a finger at Chase. Chase scoffed. Oh, come on, dude. I get that you're mad, but don't be petty. Oh, I'm not mad. I shot back. I'm just wondering how stupid you think the cops are. The officer turned to my parents. Can you explain why the initial report didn't mention that your son had already crashed the vehicle prior to it being stolen? My mom's face went white. My dad floundered for a response, but Chase, ever the cocky idiot, just snorted. Who cares? It was wrecked either way. Oh, he was so screwed. The officers exchanged a glance, and that's when I knew they were already onto him. I took my shot. Hey, officer, I said, tilting my head. You might want to check with the tow yard. Because that car? Yeah, it wasn't stolen. It was towed. My mom gasped, whipping around to Chase. Is that true? Chase looked like he wanted to disappear. The officer's radio crackled, and a moment later, she nodded. Dispatch just confirmed. The vehicle was towed, not reported stolen at the time. She turned to my parents. You filed a false police report. Silence. Then my dad had the audacity to try and backpedal. Well, maybe we misunderstood the situation, eh? The officer said dryly. I think you should all come down to the station to clarify your statements. That's when my mom completely lost it. Mason, she sobbed, grabbing my arm. Tell them you took it. Tell them it was just a misunderstanding. I stared at her, stunned. Even now, even with the cops literally figuring out the truth in real time, she still thought she could throw me under the bus. No, I said, shaking her off. I'm not lying for you. I'm done with this. The officers didn't arrest them on the spot, but they did escort all three of them into their squad cars to clarify their reports. Which was cop talk for, we already know you're lying, but let's give you enough rope to hang yourselves. I stood there in the driveway as the cars pulled away, watching my family vanish down the road. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel trapped. I felt free. As soon as the police cars disappeared down the street, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from relief. I went inside, grabbed my packed duffel bag from my room, and walked straight back out. I wasn't waiting around for them to come back and try to manipulate me into cleaning up their mess. I drove straight to my new apartment. It was small, just a studio with barely enough room for a bed and a desk, but it was mine. No more rent payments to my parents. No more getting blamed for Chase's screw-ups. No more being the family punching bag. I had just started unpacking when my phone buzzed. Mom, Mason, come home. We need to talk. Dad, you don't understand what you've done. Fix this. Chase, wow. You really screwed us over, bro, congrats. I stared at the messages, then turned off my phone. They were on their own now. The fallout happened fast. By the end of the week, Chase had been charged with filing a false police report and attempted insurance fraud. It turned out that the insurance company had been suspicious the whole time, especially after discovering the car had already been totaled before it was stolen. My parents tried to backtrack, claimed they'd just been confused when they filed the report. But the police weren't buying it. They were slapped with hefty fines and warned that if they ever tried to pull something like this again, there would be criminal charges. Chase wasn't so lucky. He was ordered to pay back every cent of the money the insurance company had already processed before the fraud was discovered. Since he didn't have that kind of cash, my parents had to cover it. Which was hilarious, considering they'd burned through their savings buying him the damn car in the first place. They started scrambling, trying to sell off whatever they could to recover from the mess they'd made. But it wasn't enough. And then came the kicker: my dad lost his job. Apparently, his boss didn't appreciate having an employee who had been investigated for fraud. It took about 2 months for them to completely unravel. By the time fall rolled around, they had to sell the house. And the best part? They actually had the nerve to show up at my apartment. I was just getting home from work when I saw them standing outside my door, looking pathetic. My dad, who had always been so smug and sure of himself, looked beaten down. My mom's eyes were red from crying. I didn't feel bad for them. Not one bit. I crossed my arms. What do you want? My mom stepped forward, voice trembling. Mason, we need help. I waited. We lost the house, she continued. We're in a tough spot, and, well, we were hoping you could take us in for a little while. Just until we get back on our feet. I blinked. Then I laughed. Loud. My dad's face turned red. This isn't funny. Oh, it's hilarious, I said. You spent years treating me like I was nothing. Like I was only good for cleaning up Chase's messes. And now you want me to save you? They started sputtering, but I cut them off. You made your choice. Over and over again, you chose Chase. You chose to protect him. To sacrifice me so he could get ahead. Well, guess what? I'm done being your safety net. I took a step back. The answer is no. My mom let out a strangled sob. But Mason, we're family. I tilted my head. Yeah? Funny how family only mattered when you needed something from me. My dad clenched his jaw. You're going to regret this. I smirked. No, Dad. I think I'm finally free. Then I shut the door in their faces. They tried calling a few more times. Left voicemails. Texted. I blocked them all. And Chase? Last I heard, he moved in with a friend, working a minimum wage job he hates. No car. No safety net. No one to clean up his messes. And me? I'm thriving. I got promoted at work. I furnished my apartment. I have peace and quiet for the first time in my life. And most importantly, I finally learned the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes, family isn't worth saving. Months passed. Life got quieter, calmer, better. I didn't realize just how much stress I had been carrying until I was finally free of it. No more tiptoeing around my parents. No more waking up in a house that constantly reminded me that I was second best. No more Chase. At first, they kept trying. My mom sent long-winded, guilt-trippy emails about family and forgiveness. My dad tried the classic, you'll regret this when we're gone route. Chase, though? Radio silence. Honestly, I think that was the most satisfying part. Because Chase wasn't mad that I had let him crash and burn, he was embarrassed. He had spent his whole life getting away with everything, skating through life on the assumption that someone else, me, would always take the hit for him. But this time, there was no safety net. The golden child had finally run out of people to protect him. I heard things through mutual acquaintances. Apparently, he was struggling. The fines, the court fees, the loss of his license, it had all hit him harder than he expected. The last I heard, he was working at a car dealership, ironically selling the kind of expensive luxury cars he used to brag about owning. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. And my parents? They burned through their savings trying to keep the house, but it wasn't enough. They lost everything. The last time I checked, they were renting a small apartment across town, a far cry from the comfortable suburban life they used to flaunt. I thought they'd try to repair things eventually, some desperate last-ditch attempt to bring me back into their lives. But after months of silence, I realized something. They weren't sorry. They were just sorry they got caught. And that's when I made peace with my decision. I wasn't the villain in this story. I wasn't some bitter son who had abandoned his family for no reason. I had simply stopped playing the role they had cast me in. I had spent too many years trying to prove myself to people who were never going to see me as an equal. People who were only interested in what I could do for them. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was done. So I moved on. I built a life that wasn't centered around cleaning up after other people's mistakes. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And you know what? It feels damn good.